Okay. If you, on the WOVA app, you can add a question, and we've got questions here from some of our online folks as well. So one of the things I wanted to ask, Rick spoke about his journal when he was camping, and Camille is a wonderful writer. And I wanted to talk about the value of writing as we think about or engage with nature. I am not a writer at all, and I'm a creative writer, I'm a scientific writer. What value can that bring to somebody as they're trying to engage with or connect with nature?
Go ahead.
I mean, this is my actual profession, teaching creative writing and often environmental literature. And so, are you ready for the semester? We'll buckle up. But one of my short answers for this question has to do with retention. That the process of writing helps many people clarify and retain information, and then pass it along. So that by writing, it takes a singular observation and an individual's observation and makes it a collectively accessible font of knowledge, information, perception, and sometimes persuasion. And so we can point actually a direct through line to things like the Wilderness Act of 1964 to literature. This poet was writing in a way that informed this next writer, who informed this next writer, who informed Wallace Stegner, who informed a young student who enjoyed Wallace Stegner's writing and was an aide for one of the senators who was trying to promote the Wilderness Act, and said, "Hey, Wallace Stegner, you're a really persuasive writer. Will you please write something?" That senator then cites as part of his reason for supporting the Wilderness Act. So all of those writers' individual thoughts became something that was not just collective in this book that we're all reading, but like truly changed legislation, changed culture. We can do the same with Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. Rachel Carson could have been that scientist just doing that work on her own, and it would have been important work. But what that book, Silent Spring, did for changing an entire culture's values, right, was huge. So that is, to me, it's the key is taking an individual, making it collective so that change is possible.
Great. I just add a couple of things. For me, nothing clarifies thinking like writing. Forces me to be clear about what I'm thinking. But in addition to clarifying thinking, it broadens and deepens my thinking. So in some ways I write to discover me. It doesn't always happen, but it's nice when it does.
Thank you. I'll start with Rick. Stewardship is an insufficient framework. You said that.
Yeah.
Could you expand on that a little bit more? What's wrong with stewardship?
It's so environmental stewardship is something that's in the lexicon. I use the term. I'm trying to learn not to, because stewardship is insufficient in many ways in terms of our relationship to the natural world. I don't steward my children. I don't steward my wife. I steward my money. I steward my tools. Stewardship connotes many things that I think are inappropriate with respect to our relationship with nature. Stewardship connotes that the true owner is off on vacation somewhere, having a good time, and he's entrusted you to care for this stuff. That's not how we see God operational in the world around us. Stewardship connotes that you're separate. You're somehow separate from the stuff. You manage it, you curate it, you care for it, but it's not in you and you are not in it. I think, and stewardship has a strong meaning of management. I think a better metaphor is kinship, of interrelationship, of being part of the community of the created. So I'm trying to steer away from this concept of stewardship. And because in Christian circles, when we talk about stewardship, what do we mean? Money, right? So, yeah, I think it's insufficient. Now, the problem then comes with what is an adequate replacement. There's a whole book written on this topic. It came out of Calvin University. They couldn't decide on an adequate replacement. Nobody's come up with an adequate replacement. Creation care, that's what I tend to use. Even that is not good for a number of reasons. Somebody yesterday mentioned Jonathan Haidt's work, and care is a word that resonates very strongly with liberals but not with conservatives. So creation care, So I don't know, I'm struggling to come up with a term. People come up with phrases or sentences, but I want a term. And I haven't found it yet, and nobody else that I know of has. So I'll stick with creation care for now.
Okay. I'm going to take a question from the audience. Is creation connection actually necessary to care for creation? And this person shares that they're not outdoorsy, their husband has pain when walking, you go out in nature, you get bug bites, you get a sunburn, we got to worry about skin cancer. I don't like camping. If it's about me, I have to use the restroom too often. We care deeply about climate change. Got solar panels, recycle, care about energy conservation. Do we really have to connect with nature?
I think if you're saying that you care deeply about climate change, you do already care about nature. I think given all the completely viable lists of complaints that question lists, the issue isn't about not being concerned about the greater than human world. The issue is not being engaged with a particular representation of what being connected with the environment means. So that like, if you're into the environment, you have to be a gardener or a hiker or and like move into space in some kind of really specific set of ways that limit, and I would argue have actually purposefully been created to limit our connections with the world, that allows then capitalist systems and other kinds of systems of purposeful disconnection to occur with less resistance. But if I only understand that my ability to connect with the greater than human world would happen if I were a hiker. And therefore, in the moment when we were all stuck at home, and even for a while the national parks were closed, like you couldn't go anywhere, then that would have meant that I would have been completely cut off. What ended up happening in 2020 was I had more time to move into my little backyard space and started really thinking, like, why is it that doesn't feel like, is supposed to not feel like the wilderness? Like, what if I really create a backyard that is more native, except that it's wild. There is a kind of wildness and wonder there. To take this even further, I felt like the only way that I could connect with the greater than world and care for it and about it, it would have to be something I could personally walk into. Then I'm not concerned about what's happening in Micronesia. I'm not concerned about what's happening in Southeast Asia. I'm not concerned about what's happening with the desertification of Central Africa. That I only can be concerned about the nature that I can touch. That feels really limited and problematic. We are an entire connected globe. And so caring for creation should not mean only one particular way of being in and with the world. And then I don't believe that it has to mean that you even have to personally be in the space about which you care. The decisions we make and the care that we take and the institutions that we support should be global and often beyond the ability of our bodies to be in those spaces.
Yeah, that's great. I'll just add a couple of things to what Camille said. So I would ask also, or suggest also that whoever posed the question does have that connection, right? And maybe ask, perhaps that connection was established when that person was a child, right, long ago. And especially that age 7 to 12 is really important for establishing nature connection. And then as Camille said, and I hope to illustrate, or I hope had hoped to say at the end of my talk, there are a million pathways to creation connection, and they don't necessarily require you to get out of your house. If anyone is familiar with the work of Norman Wiersbe over here at Duke on food and eating, I mean, you can stay in your kitchen and immerse yourself and get connected to the natural world if you're just focused on where your food comes from and how do you fix it and how do you provide it in a nutritional form to your family. And as you recognize that with every bite of food we eat, something dies. So that's what I mean by finding connection, finding meaning, finding our place in the broader world. And it doesn't require trips to wilderness. Those can be really great and fun, but part of what I was trying to convey today is awe and wonder in our everyday experience, in our everyday connections. Step outside and look at the sky, right?
You answered a couple questions in that one, so thank you. Somebody asked, when I talk with my conservative Christian heritage about learning from nature about God, silence. Or they say, I get God did it and it's awesome. There's nothing more to learn from nature. How do we get past this block? How can we move these people to another deeper level?
Yeah,
Silence.
tough one. I have to think about that. Here are a few ideas. Once again, the secular world is leading the way and the Christian world is lagging behind, and maybe someday we'll pick it up as well. The secular world, the social science, the medical science is telling us that this disconnection from nature does have serious health consequences. We are inured of them. We're so accustomed to them that we don't make those connections. But now we're learning, there actually are significant consequences. And so, one option is to say, no, it would benefit our health, our mental, emotional, physical health to make those connections. And then, a lot of it boils back to how do we understand God as creator and how do we understand God as redeemer? And if our understanding of redemption is God came to save my soul so that I can escape a fiery, eternal damnation, that's one thing. But if God's all about restoring, regenerating everything back into a flourishing state of being of which I am a part, then knowing that mind of God, I think, prompts me to learn more about, why is he interested in all this other stuff, and what might I learn from it as well? Those are just a few ideas.
I want to give you a chance, our last question here. Let's talk a little bit more about hope. Is it overly optimistic? Is there value in hope? What hope is there? You could each comment on that.
Hope is not overly optimistic. Hope is necessary, fundamentally necessary theologically, socially, culturally, but is empty without acts.
Yes.
And is empty without a willingness and a capacity to engage with resilience. Mm-hmm. So if your hope is simply like, well, I just hope it gets all better, and then you do no act to move towards better in your own space, and then in whatever ways that you can engage more globally, then hope is useless. It does nothing. It's just rhetorical. But when hope means that you act, you reflect, you understand why this is the hope you have, and you seek to increase your own resilience, your own ability to see heartbreak as well as triumph, your own ability to see this is one of the ways that, for me, engaging with the greater than human world is so exciting, because I see these cycles of return and regeneration and return, and it's a regenerative / resurrection cycle that happens in the world perpetually, moving from something dying into compost, into reconstruction. And so I find a very, a path through the living world towards being able to build my faith in the progress that I'm hoping for, right? So to me, then I get really excited being hopeful because of that direct connection.
Yeah, I don't believe in or trust in hope as Pollyannish optimism that the future is going to be okay, because I really don't think that's the case. I'll give an answer from antiquity and an answer from psychology very quickly. The answer from antiquity, Augustine is attributed with saying, hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are courage and anger. Courage to see things the way they are, and anger to determine that they don't remain as they are. There's that action component. And there is a thing called hope theory in the psychological literature. Hope requires three elements: a vision of a better future, a path toward attaining that vision, and third, self-actualization in order to proceed along that path. So a vision, a path, an opportunity. And if I have those, I have hope for a better future.
Oh, that's wonderful. Let's thank our speakers.